Hello guys, new video, and today we want to fix, or I will try to fix, one problem that I have with the Corolla still, which is what I'm going to show you, hopefully. Easy. Now it's alright. Sometimes when it's really cold, idle goes up to 3,000 RPM in cold start. You can see it's still climbing. Is to fix that. The car has always had a high idle from the start on. In the summer, it was about between, if you're just sitting at the red light, it was between 1,300, 1,400. Sometimes it went closer to 1,000, but what you want to do is have like 700, 800, RPM idle. And also the cold start now in the winter is like 3 when you get in the car in the morning, and when it's cold, 3,000 RPM feels so bad when you start the car. So what we want to do is try to overhaul the settings on the throttle body. I think we can adjust the setting for the idle screw here, which might be not set correctly. We need to check if the play is correct and the cable, but it looks okay. But also mostly setting the throttle position sensor. The car had a broken throttle position sensor in the beginning, so I replaced it with another used one, which seems to work, but I never set it up correctly. So we're going to set up that today. I'm going to show you how to do it. I think all you need for that, hopefully, if it works, that's also my first try, is a multimeter. And then, because as you can see, my idle screw is turned all the way in and it's still idling so high. So we're going to try to take off the intake and get that all set up. And I will take you along the way how to do everything in a pretty, hopefully, quick and easy, simple way. Without further ado, let's get to it. Let's start with the idle screw, or the, how do you say it, the dead end screw here, up here, this little one. Okay, to get better access to everything, we're gonna take off just these lines and take off the intake, because then we can see where the throttle blade's actually sitting, because this is gonna set the throttle blade end stop. So that's what we wanna make sure is set properly. And to have a better look at it, we're gonna take off the intake and then set it from there. Then of course, since you're dealing with the idle when the car is warm, you wanna firstly warm up your car. Slowly get in there, 64 degrees, and we're letting it warm up. And then we're gonna try setting all of this up. So 3 bolts we're gonna address is a stop screw up here. This is the stop screw for the valve. And then we have this little adjuster down here, which is for this valve right here, which is also like a drivability kind of solenoid. And then we might need to set up this idle screw, and then of course the TPS. So we can also reconnect these. You can see idle chain in already. And yeah, we want to try to get the stable idle, because I can also hear the car misfiring a tiny bit in idle. So that's what I also want to try and solve all in one go. Okay, what we're first trying to do is set up this idle screw. But not this one here. This one is started all the way already for me for some reason. We're gonna undo this all here and see how far out we can spin this one. Okay, nice. This doesn't sound bad at all already. You're at 1,000 RPM now. Whoa. Shit. locks the lock nut back up. And as you can hear, while working down the lock nut, the adjustment screw turned a bit as well. So if you don't have a good wrench situation for that, you need to back up the screw a bit more, then you want to tighten it down and then tighten the nut. So currently we're sitting at about 1000 RPMs. So I want to back it up a tiny bit more. Okay, nice. Now we're at 900 RPM roughly, so I would call that set. And now we're gonna concentrate on this other screw below, which is for this plunger here, which is more like a drivability thing. And what I read is that you should set it that in idle, it's just barely touching that plunger and not pushing it in really. That's where it should go apparently. Yeah, let's try that. Okay, that looks good. So next we want to address this. So for that we can turn off the card first. Okay, next what we're gonna do, after we set up all our end stops here correctly, we're gonna set up the throttle position sensor. For that we need our multimeter set to ohm, so the resistance reading at 2K, so for most multimeters the lowest setting. And as you can see also we're set to ohm. So we're gonna measure the resistance between the two top pins in here, in this, because we want to get to a point, because they're gonna show a resistance, and we want to get to a point where they just barely start showing OL or 1, which just means no connection in between two pins. So barely at that point. But we're not gonna set that at the resting position of the throttle body, but we're gonna put, normally need a feeler gauge, I don't have one, but the goal is, if I'm not mistaken, 0.5 millimeters feeler gauge in between the end stop and the bolt, the set screw. So I'm gonna stick my DIY feeler gauge in between here. So we're just slightly opened for the throttle body. And then normally it's best to have some kind of little clamps to put on the end here, because if you're holding it just like this, it's a bit hard to do, but you're gonna see it's still possible if you just hold them at the top two pins. And then what you do is just you loosen these two bolts up here, these two which hold in the TPS, and they're very hard to strip. They're Phillips head, so I would recommend replacing these with normal hex head bolts. But I don't have any currently, so I'll replace them after this video, just one at a time at the end, so we don't change the setting again. So we're gonna loosen them up to a point where you can barely move the sensor. And then we're gonna get our pins at the top two pins. As you can see here, we're now reading 0.03, and you basically turned all the way towards you counterclockwise to start off with. And now you're gonna spin it clockwise until you barely start seeing OL or 1 here. So we're gonna slowly spin it. Slowly you can see the number going up. And there we are, OL. So we're gonna spin it back. We're back to reading OL. Spin it back to reading OL. So that's the exact point where we want to be. Tiny bit back. We're gonna have a reading a bit away from me, OL. So that's the exact spot where we want to be. Turn it to barely OL. Right here. And then you want to make sure that you you carefully tighten the bolts, because if you if you tighten it up and the number changes, you might need to set it again. So right here, I'm gonna hold it in position and tighten up our bolts. All right, then we're gonna go back in, just remeasure it. We barely have a reading. Oh, there we are, OL. Let me check if that's just me missing the pins or if it's actually our reading. Because of course, if you don't have your pins lined up, you're not gonna get an accurate reading. There we are, pins lined up, OL. But remember, barely OL. So yeah, let's make sure we tighten it back up fully. Okay, and then don't forget the lower one as well. But this is a bit hard to get to with the screwdriver down here. So yeah, that's why I also recommend changing these to hex head. Okay, and with that you're all set. You can start up your engine and it should work flawlessly. Let's connect the intake and we're all ready to go. And that's our cold start. And let's see when the RPM starts dropping after the engine warms up if we did our setting right. And then it's just going to be some driving around and see if your settings work. If not, you might need to do some fine tuning with the idle control and everything, but that's the basics on how I did it at least. Thank you for watching. Bye bye. Okay, one thing it also massively improved is the rev hang. Now when you're driving it and shift into the next gear, the RPM actually drops accordingly. It doesn't just stay up high. That's one problem I had before as well, which definitely made the drivability so much better. So it's a big success. There's still a little bit of a misfire at idle, but the idle is a lot lower, it's a lot nicer, and it feels really good. So I call this a big success.